So in this video, we're going to continue our explanation of price elasticity of demand and price elasticity of supply. And to begin with, we're going to be talking about a little bit more about the actual economic interpretation of the numerical values that we get when we calculate price elasticity of demand and supply. Okay, so let's just start with our previous example. So in our previous example, we got that price elasticity of demand was, 1.675, right? And we said that what that meant essentially was that when price went up by 1%, our quantity demanded would go down by 1.675%. Okay, now the first thing I want to say is that be careful here with the direction of these arrows, right? You can clearly see here that when price goes up, quantity demanded goes down, right? But so just what I'm saying is when you're on a test or doing an assignment, you want to just make sure that these arrows are correct. So for example, if you had price going from 10 to 15, and then you had, say, quantity supply going from 50 to 100, right? You would get some number, which I think would actually be the same as here, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, you would essentially get the same number. You would get 1.65. But in that case, it would be that when price goes up by 1%, quantity supplied goes up by 1.675, right? So just pay attention to the direction of the arrows. But as I was saying, we get this number 1.675. Okay, so let's write this down. We get the following. Price elasticity of demand is equal to 1.675, right? And this translates to when price goes up by 1%, then quantity demanded goes down by 1.675%. Okay, now this is what we would refer to as an elastic demand. Okay, now an elastic demand simply means that elasticity is greater than 1. Okay, now what I'm interested in here is exploring the economic meaning of elastic demand being greater than 1. Now, in a general sense, if I have x over y, so I have two numbers, let's say these are two positive numbers, okay, just two positive integers, just to make things simple. If x over y is greater than 1, what does this imply? This implies that x is greater than y, right? If this top number is bigger than this bottom number, you're going to get some result that is greater than 1. Okay, similarly, right, if you had x over y is equal to 1, what would this imply? This would imply that x is equal to y, right? And finally, if you had that x over y was less than 1, that would mean that this top number is smaller than this bottom number. So you would have that x is less than y. Now, what does this have to do with elasticity? Well, remember that elasticity, so price elasticity of demand here, is nothing but the percentage change in quantity demanded relative to a percentage change in price. So if this formula ends up being greater than 1, what does that mean? Well, that implies, so if this is greater than 1, this actually implies that our percentage change in quantity demanded is greater than our percentage change in price. And this is the economic meaning that I was getting at. When we have elastic demand, then every time our price changes by 1%, our quantity demanded will decrease by more than 1%. So elastic demand means that quantity demanded is very sensitive to a change in price. Okay, so let's be a little bit more orderly about this and write this down in the following way. If and by the way, all of this applies to price elasticity of supply as well, okay? Actually, I'll write it down using both. So if eta slash eta S, okay, so either price elasticity of demand or supply, is greater than 1, then this implies that percentage change in quantity demanded slash quantity supplied is greater than our percentage change in price. And this means that either our demand or our supply is elastic. Okay? If price elasticity of demand or supply is equal to 1, then this implies that our percentage change in quantity demanded or quantity supplied is exactly equal to our percentage change in price. So when price changes by 1%, then our quantities demanded or supplied also changes by 1%. So the percentage change will always be the exact same. This is referred to as unit elastic. Okay? And then finally, if elasticity is less than 1, then our percentage change in quantity demanded or quantity supplied is less than the percentage change in price, and we refer to this as inelastic. Okay. Again, the economic meanings here should be pretty clear. Here, we have quantities demanded or supplied that are very, very sensitive to a change in price. So even a small change in price will result in a comparatively larger change in quantity demand or quantity supplied. Over here, a change in price would equal a percentage change in price would equal the exact same percentage change in quantity demanded or quantity supplied. And over here, we have quantity supplied or quantity demanded that are not so sensitive to a change in price. So some percentage change in price will result in a change in quantity demanded or quantity supplied, but a relatively smaller change. Okay? Now, let's look at how this can be represented visually. How can we tell just by looking at a graph which, say, demand curve or supply curve is more elastic or less elastic than another demand curve or supply curve? Okay, so let's just draw out two. I'll use the demand curve as an example. Okay, let's just draw out two graphs. That is way too big. Okay. Try this again. Okay. And I want this to be to scale, so let's just copy paste that. Okay. Price, quantity. Okay, now let's draw two demand curves. Okay, I'm going to draw this demand curve here. It looks like that. I'm going to call this demand 1. And then another demand curve here, which looks like that. Let's call that demand 2. Okay, now let's take two hypothetical prices, okay, and we'll set them at exactly the same levels on each graph. We're trying to draw two graphs that are basically exactly the same. Okay, so that's P1. And let's draw some other price, and let's call that one P2. Okay, and now let's say that our price has decreased from P1 down to P2. Okay, so that would result, of course, in an increase in quantity demanded as per the law of demand. So let's just draw out that increase. Now, on the first graph, our change will be from Q1 to Q2. So it'll be, a fairly large change, right? Whereas in the second case here, you'll notice that the change is relatively small. Okay, just a little arrow like that. Okay, so in this case, right, in our first case here, you have a change in price, the exact same change in price as, is that what I don't think my laser's working. Okay. Well, in the first case here, you have the exact same change in price as in the second case, right? So exact same change in price, but a way larger change in quantity in the first case than in the second case. Okay. Now, based on what we just learned, right, this case 1 here, D1, the quantity demanded is way more sensitive to a change in price than in the case of D2. So we say that demand here is relatively elastic. Okay, and this demand curve here is relatively inelastic. Okay, so the lesson here is the steeper the demand curve, the less elastic the demand. Okay, and of course, by more or less elastic, we just mean values of elasticity that are bigger, right? So more elastic just means that the value of the elasticity is bigger. Less elastic or more inelastic just means that the value of the elasticity is smaller. So that's how you can tell just by looking at a graph which is more or less elastic. Now, of course, you could do the same thing with supply, right? If you had two graphs which were exactly the same in all ways, except in one case the supply curve was pretty shallow, or shallow the right word? Non-steep. Yeah, shallow. And that was, whereas in the second case you had a very steep supply curve, then in this case, this would be your relatively elastic supply curve, and this would be your relatively inelastic supply curve. Okay, so that's going to do it for this video. As usual, if you found it useful, please like it, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below if you have suggestions for any further videos, or if you have questions about existing videos, and I will see you for next video.